Everyone's got a story inside. I don't care if you think you're really boring. You have a book inside of you.
Sharing your story is the secret sauce to marketing.
Everyone write that down. Write that down.
I said to you, and I'm not afraid to say this, lawyers are egomaniacs.
The Earley Show will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
Answering Legal is staffed with trained professionals who know how to handle legal calls in a professional, courteous manner. And that provides a positive experience to callers. The receptionists are trained and understand the type of calls that our firm is getting. They can answer frequently asked questions. They can take messages. They can schedule appointments. And that allows us to, one, promptly respond to our client, and two, we have a record. That is probably the most crucial part of this business.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Earley Show, sponsored by our friends over at Answering Legal. I'm your host, Chris Earley. I'm a personal injury lawyer in Boston. On this podcast, we always bring you the very best in the legal industry. And we have a real treat today. We have a guy, he's a busy guy, and I've been hounding him. I said, Neal, you got to get on the podcast. Come on. Well, we got him today. All right. So, because I'm a pushy son of a gun. So we have Neal Goldstein on the call today. Neal's a personal injury attorney and author from Long Island. He's a guy I've gotten to in the past few years. He wrote a book, I wrote a book, and that's how we connected. And so Neal's a really good story about resilience, toughness, authenticity. He's currently involved heavily in mentoring millennial lawyers, younger lawyers just starting out, those lawyers who want to get going in the right foot. Neal's helping him. He just released a second book. So his hair is on fire. He's got a lot of stuff going on. We're going to learn a lot from him, I'm sure. So as always, make sure you sharpen your pencils. There'll be plenty of writer downers and takeaways from today's episode. Neal, it's so good to see you. Thank you for coming on to the show today, man.
Great to see you, and I'm glad that we finally were able to put this together.
All right, super quick story for the audience. 30-second quick story. I'm in the Bahamas in 2022. John Fisher, the Mastermind Experience Facebook group, said, hey, Neal Goldstein just wrote a book. I don't know who Neal Goldstein was. I thought, it's interesting. Let me check out this guy's book. I went on Amazon. I bought the book, and that's what inspired me to write my book, Scaling the Wall. Shortly thereafter, Neal and I met. So this is a joy to have you on the call, Neal, because of your story. I wrote my story. Writing my story changed my life. So I'm really excited to talk with you about your unique story, your challenges, your successes, because you're so much more than a personal injury lawyer, right? You're a guy who has a lot of depth. So I'm excited to talk with you. So that's really how I first connected with Neal, and that we've been friends ever since. So, we're going to obviously talk about your book, but could you just, without giving away too much, obviously is in the book, could you just talk about generally growing up, mom and dad, and ultimately, right, why did you write a book?
Yeah. Well, God, so some of this will resonate with a whole bunch of people. And I know that, look, Chris, I read your book over the weekend, and actually it was a little bit long. I read the beginning part of it about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And then I finished the rest of it pretty quickly over the weekend. Easy read.
Thank you.
Great read. And
it means a lot.
I say resonating because there are parallels to our stories. I grew up with a mom that had multiple sclerosis at a time when, the world didn't really know what to do with people that had multiple sclerosis. Now it's, 40, 50 years later, it's a whole different story. And when I say I grew up during the most important years, up until, I was about 18, she was either walking with a walker or in a wheelchair. My father absconded from the home at age 12. And from 12 to the time that he passed away, which I recently found out was in 2019, I think I saw him maybe 5 times. And so I had a mother that wanted to be a mother, but couldn't for a whole bunch of reasons, and a father that just simply didn't want to be a father. Mm-hmm. I had 2 brothers, both that were when you're a kid, the difference in ages are much wider, and so they were both 6 and 8 years older than me, and so they were doing their own thing. And it was a pretty dysfunctional family. Nobody communicated to me ever about what was going on with my mother, and I saw things progress from walking relatively normal to a walker, and then ultimately to a wheelchair, father and mother fighting all the time, yelling, screaming, all that stuff. Mother falling and me having to pick her up because the other two brothers were out of the house doing their own thing. And unfortunately, things were left to me that you would never want to have your child do, let alone, a mother would want her son to do, but I did what I had to do at the time. Hard to build relationships at that point when you're stuck with that situation. And unfortunately, it led to a progressive, let's say, downhill period for me, period meaning years, in which ultimately caused me to drop out of high school. And with my mother's permission, actually, which probably was the worst thing I could ever do in my life. And at that point, after a series of other interactions that I had with other people while I had dropped out of high school, I started to embrace other people. So, for instance, I would wander the streets, kind of like what do people do during the day and while everybody else is in school. And so I went into a building that I actually went to kindergarten in, and I was just walking around there looking at it, and I was tapped on the shoulder by one of the social workers there who said, "Can I help you?" And the answer to that and the story behind that, which is in the book, led me to embracing other human beings in a more meaningful way, which ultimately supported everything that I've done since. And that was get my equivalency diploma, go back to college, did really well, go to law school. And I always felt like, I wanted to share this journey with my children. Hard to do it by just talking to them. Sometimes they don't want to listen. Sometimes they'll listen, but they don't think it's important to them. And sometimes they listen, but you don't really know that. So I figured if I would write it, they'll always have it. They'll always have it. And then when I wrote it, somebody said to me, "Hey, why are you doing this just for your children? There are a lot of people who could get takeaways from this." And so I said, "Okay, that's cool." So I kind of, made it more universal for other people to learn from some of the stories that I share in the book.
A lot of things to unpack there, but dropping out of high school, becoming a successful lawyer, I don't frankly know anyone else who's done that. And you said that very sort of modestly, but that's a big chasm to fall into. You must have felt low, and then it sounds like you found purpose through relationships, and you discovered something there, and then your life started to get better. So, obviously your first book is called "Who's in the Waiting Room," right? And so I remember reaching out to you because I started to write my book, and I reached out, and you were kind of like, hey, what's up? Like, you know who I was? I was just some random guy calling you. You were very friendly. You were kind of like, hey, like, how can I help you? So I read your book, was really good. And then I remember you said the writing part was hard, but the editing part was the hardest. It really stuck with me. When I was writing my book, I was challenged because I didn't know how much to share about other people, right? It's like, I don't want to tell the story about other people. And I chose not to do. I told my story, but it involved other people. Did you deal with that at all?
Yes.
You're writing. Okay. Yeah.
The most difficult part for me, well, the most difficult part is exactly what you said. And that's how much do I want the world to know, about me, because the book does go into a few, let's just say, dark areas. And how much do I want, how much permission do I have to share about other people? And considering that I had two children, and there was a part that I had talked about their mom, my ex-wife, I had to be very mindful. But at the end, I had to also say to myself, if this book is going to have any meaning, if this book is going to impact any one person, then I have to reveal more than not.
Right.
And that's what I did. The bigger revelations, truthfully, were about me and not about other people. This book is a celebration of other people. For me, I had to be honest with whoever the reader is, and let them know where I came from, the journey, even in those dark areas, and how I managed to navigate out of it.
So, you are, a successful guy, but you, like I said, you had a low point, dropped out of, just going back in the day, your, late teenage years. How the heck did you get into law school? Right. I think you say you went to college, you did really well, but like, was that really hard to get into law school? I mean, the deck is stacked against you though.
Yeah. Well, you think that, and there's some truth to it. I mean, we look back, I mean, I'll answer the question, but let me just first say, when we look back, as Steve Jobs said in his great commencement speech, when we look back, we could connect the dots. And when people like you and me and so many other people that have had challenges and difficulties look back and see the experiences they had, that's what's formed, me today. That's what formed you to be the man that you are today. And you wouldn't trade that for anything now that you could look back and connect all the dots. But back then, yeah, sure. Give me 2 new parents. I'd want that in a minute. Looking back, never, because that's what made me who I am. Yeah, applying to law school wasn't easy. I mean, back then, my goal was, once I made the decision to go to law school, I said to myself, I'll go whoever wants to take me. So if the only place I get into is some law school, and nothing against Mississippi, but some law school in Mississippi, then that's where I'm going to go. Well, when I started getting all the acceptance letters from the New York metropolitan area law schools that I applied to, I was shocked. And the only thing I could say, the only reason, because I was an average student. Most people with my grades would not have gotten into law school. I think my personal statement moved people because it was authentic. It was real. I'd have to think that maybe it shed a tear and that maybe somebody looked at it and said, we have to give this guy a chance. And so I think that's what got me into law school.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Authenticity is the way. I mean, I think a lot of lawyers struggle with that, but I think you and I are so exposed in our books, right? About, this is who I am, take or leave it. And just going back a second, you said, how much should I share? I talked with my wife about this, like, hey, like I had really freaking hard choices to make. She said, you're either going to write the book or you're not going to write the book. We're not going to go half-half. So you're either going to do it or not. I had a coach. I had a coach working with me. Did you have a coach or no?
I didn't. I wouldn't say I had a coach, but I certainly had really supportive people. I had one of the best people on my team. I'm sure she wouldn't mind me mentioning her name. Jennifer Quinn really helped me along the way. But at the end of the day, I was going to really verbal vomit, if you will, a lot of stuff. And I think it resonated with a lot of people. Look, I read your book and I know what you let the world see. And, that can't, it's not easy, man. That is not easy to be able to tell people, well, here's my problem. Here's where I screwed up. My life was coming apart. We had no money. All these things that, a lot of people, especially lawyers, because lawyers have egos, even the two of us have egos, but some lawyers are off the chart, when it comes to egos, which I can't stand.
I know.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But we revealed ourselves and we let ourselves be vulnerable, which I think is, unfortunately, it's not done too often.
No. it's almost easy to stick out. Just freaking let it rip yourself, and people are gonna be like, "Whoa, that
Right.
kid's a little different over there."
Right.
And
Exactly.
so there's just so much to chop up. Like obviously, you got a really successful practice, and I do want to talk about that. Just another thing, a question about your book. I wrote my book, then I hired a coach who said, "We're going to rewrite this from scratch. This is shit." Okay, so I spent about 7 months of deep in the shit, rewriting, like an actual book, learning how to write, learning how to show instead of writing to tell. She said, think about like you're an airline pilot. You're describing the vegetation. Oh, we got some bamboo over here. We got some zebra, explaining the landscape downstairs as you fly over. I'm curious how long the writing process took. And did you find it as hard as I did to write creatively, to write well?
Yeah. I mean, it took about 2.5 years. And I
So
think,
hard. So hard.
because what happens, tell me if you've ever experienced this, like there might've been a few moments where I was on a rip, man. I'd write like, 10 pages, 15 pages. And then I swear to you, there were like 3 months where I just like, I can't.
Did you ever want to give up?
No, not at that point.
There were times where I wanted to give up, man. I was like, God damn, this is the beginning, like first couple of chapters. I was like, God damn, this is hard. It was so good. I don't mind digging shit. Like I don't mind doing hard. But like this is tough. And so I want to talk about the second book. Let me ask you though, who, if a lawyer's thinking about writing a book, what should they know about what they're signing up to do? Because you and I, we know what it takes, but who should write a book and who should not, given how much is involved, right, with this whole deal?
Well, I'm honest. I'll tell you the truth. I wanted to write a book for many, 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 many years, but I couldn't do it early on. And, but I knew I wanted to do it. So, you got to have the desire and you got to be willing to say, okay, man, I'm just going to sit down and start writing, and I'm going to do this. Who should do it? People that can be somewhat vulnerable. But look, my second book is very different than my first book. I didn't really need to be that vulnerable in my second book, although even in my second book, I was somewhat vulnerable because I'm somewhat contrarian. I usually do things that a lot of people don't do.
Which is great.
But the first book, if you want a book that really has meaning, sorry, you probably hear the siren, then you have to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to share something, share your story. Those are the books, the nonfiction books that really make an impact when you really share pieces of yourself. The best speakers out there, whether you like Tony Robbins or Gary Vee or Brene Brown, what is it that they do differently than other people? They tell you the same things we tell people, right? They're not making up anything new. It's the same old, but the way they say it and the stories that they manage to weave into their presentations, whether it's in a book or it's on stage, it hits you. Sometimes it hits you and sometimes it doesn't. When these people do it, it hits me. And so, if you're able to weave your stories into whatever it is that you're trying to present to the public, those are the people that really should write a book.
And frankly, just listen to you now, I feel like everyone's got a story inside. Like everyone's unique. You don't have to have a story like, oh, it's a little bit of an outlier deal here. Like you could, I don't care if you think you're really boring. You have a book inside of you. All right. So Neal, the attorney just wrote the book. How does the attorney market the book? Because it does it no good to bust your ass if no one's going to read it. How do you get into people's hands? Like, how did you go about that?
Well, both my books are self-published. The first book was done by Forbes Advantage, which is a subdivision of Forbes. And they helped me along the way a bit, but some ways of publicizing it are more expensive than others. And the truth is, most of the publicity was done by me, social media, sharing it with friends. I did a book launch party, which, really brought a lot of people together and really got the word out there. I mean, I know a lot of people in the legal world, so that kind of made its way out there. But, look, I think it's the same way that I got clients over the years. And that is, it's always top of mind. It's always top of mind because I know people like a good story, and people like, the arc. People like the idea of seeing a great ending, if that's what it is. So I tried to share it with as many people as I could. Listen, it's not going to make the New York Times bestseller list. I get it. I understand it. I didn't do it for that reason. I did it to have an impact on some people, and it did. So, look, you have to be realistic about your goals.
Right. And I'm going to assume you feel the same way. I feel like, so you've written two. I'm just talking about, just your first one and your second. I would bet a lot of you feel like they're really good books. And I feel like my book is really good. So I'm always trying to just push it out because you never know who finds it. I've got a girl, she's a prolific best-selling author, high level. I send her my book. Just if she likes it, she posts it. Who the hell knows? But like, I go to the post office constantly, send my book out to people. And I said, and so what I'm doing now, so I want to ask you how you've woven it kind of into your practice. What I do now is generally, I've started to send it to new clients. It's a little bit of work. How have you woven it into your personal injury practice?
That's great that you're doing that. And I do the same thing pretty much. But the truth is that I was weaving my book, my stories, well before I wrote it.
Oh, yeah.
And so even when clients would come see me, when the moment was right, I shared a piece of my story. Because let's be honest, nobody has one story. There's generally not one story. Generally, it's a series of events that have occurred, or a series of smaller stories that have occurred during your lifetime, which led to who you are today, or your why, if you will. But look, some people, I guess, could have a big story. But what I try to do is I take clips of my story, and at the right moment, I share it. So let me give you a quick example. So I had a client come in, very nice people, Iraqi war veterans. Their son was bullied horribly, kicked, punched, bleeding, just horrible, was going to kill himself on Christmas Day, Father's Day. And luckily they found out beforehand. I mean, I won't go into all the negligence allegations, but here's the story. When they first walked in, this is before my book, when they first walked into the office, they sat in the conference room, mom and dad, really nice. You couldn't ask for better people. And their son at the time, who was just finishing middle school, walked in, pan face, had his arms crossed like this, wouldn't really look me in the eyes, and said very little. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I really like to know the kids when I represent them for something like this. And so I'm thinking, how am I going to get to them? And so at some point, I shared a piece of my story with him. Now, we didn't have the same story, but we had, significant challenges. And so I went into my story, not a long story, but I went into it. And as I'm telling him a little bit about me, dropping out of high school, coming back, his hands unfolded. He moved his chair closer to me. He moved physically further into the conference table. And by the end, he was speaking in more than one word answers. Now, I didn't change the kid's life, but I allowed him to feel that I'm safe, that it's okay with me, that I'm no better than him, other than the fact that I'm older and I've learned more, but I came from difficulties too and managed to get out of it. And so there was some sense that he's not alone in the world, that there's other people also who've been through difficulties. And if you could share your story, that's the one big takeaway that people get. They don't feel alone anymore, that they have similar problems that you may be talking about in your story. And that's a major impact, especially in today's world. So yeah, I mean, I try to share that, those stories with clients that I meet often, because quite honestly, when I tell people my story, different parts of it, they just feel good. They feel good. They feel like they're talking with somebody who's genuine, who's authentic. I'm sure you get the same feeling when you do the same.
100%. I like the story about that kid. It sounds like you were no longer an attorney who was scary and intimidating and who was freaked out by. Instead, you became a very welcome guest at that table to him. And because you were speaking humanly, you weren't dropping $100 an hour, $100 words like law perpetuities and negligence. Like you were like talking on his level, which is the human level. So even if you're older than him, it's a universal sort of cut through, right? Leveler. And so that is an authentic relationship, right? So you are no longer the scary lawyer. You are the dude with problems, just like he's the dude with problems.
Right.
And that's why like writing a book is so, and a lot of 95% of the people, 99% of the people on this call won't write a book. You don't have to write a book. Frankly, you shouldn't unless you're like insane, because it's so hard and vulnerable and insane. But share your story. So Neal, I started sharing my story on social media. Like I have friends from back then that didn't even know my story. I never talked about it. When I dropped it on social, I saw it was a resonation. Is that a word? A resonating impact. I started crying when I saw that on social media. Okay, this feels normal to me. And then you, in this weird way, came into my life. And I was in the Bahamas online. I was like, holy smokes, who's this dude?
Right.
Because I didn't even know what your book was about, but I saw the title. John Fisher talked about it for a second. I'm like, I have a feeling I should check out that dude's book. Right. Yeah. And then my life is so different now, because it's not the way of like, oh, I'm an author. It's like, I'm just an average dude who wrote a book, but it's a platform that you've earned to get people to listen to you, because you've earned it, because you have some street cred, because you're not a perfect person. You have a lot of problems. People resonate with that.
Well, one of the chapters in that first book is about sharing your story. And what I tell people is that sharing your story is the secret sauce to marketing. And I say
100%. Everyone write that down. Write that down.
And I say that because I don't want people to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying share your story in an underhanded way or in a cunning way. This is not, I'm not asking anybody to be Prince Machiavelli, where he did everything underhanded. Everything was for an ultimate goal, a transactional. I'm asking people to share their story in a genuine and authentic way. And when you do that, because your story is unique, nobody else is going to have your story. There may be similarities, but when you do that, people will start looking at you differently. And at the end of the day, clients want to talk about clients want to work with people that they like, they trust, and they respect. And there is no better way to gain all three of those things in a story that has meaning.
100%. Not only does it attract clients, it attracts ride or die clients who are going to really like you because they get your story. They have talk about it all the time, Neal, affinity, connection. That's what this establishes. And not only are you going to get a ton of business, it's good business. People are going to bust your chops and give you a hard time because they like you, they like your story, and they trust you to be the lawyer. And they're going to tell everybody about Neal. Like Neal's the man. Like go to Neal.
Right.
And he's the guy you can trust. He's my guy. That's what this is about. So what you just said about marketing through authenticity, sharing your story. So what are some ways a practitioner can do that? Because a lot of lawyers, this is a little bit of a foreign topic because we're so buttoned up and straight-laced, or our tie is really tight on our neck, Neal, right? So it's like, how do we loosen the tie and get real and start sharing stuff?
Well, let's be honest, Chris. Many lawyers, regardless of our conversation here, many lawyers call this bullshit. And just be a good lawyer, and that's it. But the way I discuss this with people is I say to them, listen, You don't have to share your story or your whole story. You could share pieces of it. And even if you don't think you have I was hanging from the cliff and I managed to get, it doesn't have to be that type of story. All you have to talk about is, how about something like this? Oh, you had to see me. Yeah. Last week, my 2 kids were in the car and they were both, screwing around, and I had to stop them and they were both laughing at me. I don't know. It doesn't have to be a serious story, but it has to have some meaning to it, even if it's funny. So if you're uncomfortable sharing the biggest story, then share a small story. Maybe something that was funny that happened over the weekend while you were watching, the Super Bowl, or maybe it's a story about you and your brother, something like that. But it doesn't have to be this, edge of the mountain type of a story. The other thing is, stories sometimes they're difficult to even, like some people say, well, I don't have a story. And for instance, I know somebody who grew up in a very wealthy family. He says, Neal, I had a good life. It was good. And I don't know what my story is. And then I got to know this person over time. And you know what I found out? I found out he was always living in the shadow of his father. Like he always felt like he had to, be his father. Well, that's a story, man. That is a story. That's a story. Everybody's got one. You just got to dig a little deeper to find out what it is.
You tease that out of him.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
sir.
good.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, so people love stories. People love real stories. So the realer you can get, the better, because nothing bad has accrued to my life. When I share my story, it's like the universe is like, oh, good job. Here's some blessings I'm going to bestow on you because you're being vulnerable. And we need that in this world, authenticity. Let me ask you this. So you went through the abyss, you write the first book, you climbed the mountain, and that was such a good feeling to release that book, Neal, right? I published it, I self-published on Amazon. I was so proud of that sucker, and I still am. Like, that's my baby. Why did you decide to climb the mountain for a second time? And what prompts you to write that second book?
So I felt as though some of the readers, or maybe non-readers, like they got takeaways, but they wanted something more that they could do, some more actionable moves that they could make in order to build their life in a better way. And my credibility is with lawyers. It's with personal injury lawyers. So I said, okay, let me talk from a place where I'm really comfortable and I know what's going on in the PI world. I'm doing it almost 40 years now. And so I said, okay, I'm going to try to weave what I believe is my philosophy, which is, creating genuine and authentic relationships to a successful end. Let me try to weave those into different types of moves people can make at either at no cost or minimal cost or just time, so that they can grow, particularly younger lawyers who are deeply frustrated because it's hard to catch up with the money that gets poured into digital. Ways to grow your law firm organically from the philosophy, from the idea that growing your law firm organically will not only create clients, but they'll create fans, as you alluded to before.
Yes. Yeah, real fans.
Yeah, that's what you want, right?
Ride or dies.
Yeah.
So, okay, a quick question. I'm curious. I haven't asked you about this. You did an audiobook of the first book. How'd you go about doing that? It was really cool. I want to check that out. How'd you do that?
Yeah. So the audio version, I think, is being dropped in the next week, if it hasn't been already. And I found somebody that John Fisher recommended, who is in upstate New York. For 3 days, I spent up there, and we had a great time. I never did anything like that before. He is a well-known audio engineer. And I did it because here's the thing, Chris. How cool is it to listen to the person who went through all that stuff?
Yeah.
And so the voice was another cathartic experience for me. Writing is one, and then vocally saying it. Wow, that was powerful. There were moments There were definitely moments when I had to stop because, you know, when you start going through the darker moments, especially, you stop, but on the other hand, you want people to hear it. You want people to hear how you're feeling. So it was a great experience. I don't really know how many people it's going to reach. I hope it reaches a lot of people. Could cut up a bunch of clips and overlay it on some social media posts that you do, which I think is great also. It's just another way of getting, you know, your book out there.
Yeah, I love it. 3 days. That's a lot longer than I thought it would take. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's hard. A lot of takes, I'm sure.
Well, what he did was a really professional audio engineer. He puts in intro music, outro music, and then he has somebody come in and read the reviews and read the, you know, I said, okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. So I know you're working a lot with younger lawyers.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's interesting because you just say you're practicing for 40 years, you know, so you're now helping the next generation, right? The younger cats coming up. Why, you know, how did you get started with that? What propelled you in that direction?
Yeah. Really good question. So the truth is it's a mixture of younger lawyers, also, believe it or not, law students and undergraduate students. So in next month, I'm helping somebody at a local college here put together a pre-law undergraduate program, and I'll be talking to a bunch of undergraduate students. The reason I chose millennial lawyers, as you see on social media, is because I feel like there's a period of years between getting out of law school and, let's say, you know, whatever the age is after millennial. I mean, it's whether it's in your 40s or your 50s, when the indoctrination of being a lawyer hasn't really solidified in them yet.
Right.
I said to you, and I'm not afraid to say this, lawyers are egomaniacs.
No doubt.
They generally, now there are exceptions. We know plenty of people who are exceptions. I get it. I don't want to hear from a bunch of lawyers saying, well, we're all not like that. A lot of us are. A lot of us are like that.
Oh, yeah.
And we want to show you, you know, how great our office looks, how big it is, how many verdicts we got, how many settlements we got. Millennial lawyers and younger are just trying to, you know, put their foot down, step in the water a little bit, and try to do it without much pain. They're not brainwashed yet to think that somehow you're better than your client, or working in a big law firm is better or more, has more prestige than working in a small law firm or your own law firm. Personal injury is not looked at the same way as other areas of law. Those things have been so indoctrinated into law students that it's tough. But certainly 20 years after that, it's very hard to reach lawyers. No lawyer my age generally is going to listen to me. Some might, but many don't want to listen to me. They think they've got the answer. They've made it. And I say, okay, do me a favor. Don't follow me. Don't listen to me. It's okay. Do what you want, man. It's okay.
Can't reach them all, Neal. You know?
No, you can't. And millennial lawyers and younger you still have the ability to try to help them achieve success without going through a lot of pain and without thinking that they're somehow above everybody else, which destroys the philosophy of treating people in a genuine and authentic manner.
Let me ask you this. I employ a lot of millennials. I'm sure a lot of lawyers on the call employ a lot of millennials. What are some things they really care about? Something tells me it's authenticity, right? You know, purpose. It's not all about dough. What do you see? What do you witness with millennials in terms of what resonates with them in the workplace and what makes them want to stick around? I love.
Yeah, I think. Look, people want to make money. Young people definitely want to make money, and unfortunately, you know, we're living in a world where, you know, young people have to make money. So let's not fool ourselves into thinking that that's not an issue. So of course they want to make money. And in our business, the way you make money is you bring in work, or you're a great trial lawyer and bring in a big verdict. It's one of those two ways. And yes, authenticity is very important to them too. Not even a question. Just, I think authenticity was the word of the year last year. And so that's really important. So and of course, people want to know, young people want to know, how are we going to compete? How are we going to compete with all these other major personal injury law firms out there that are spending tons and tons and tons of money on digital, billboards, all over the place. We know who we're talking about, these big firms. There are big firms in your area nationally, tough. And so how does a young person get their footing? And so you have to be willing to invest yourself and do the things necessary, not to meet clients and generate clients. You want to generate fans. And the way you generate fans is by digging deep into who you are, becoming authentic, being who you are, no matter who that is, and being surrounded by people who are going to treat you the same way. And I know that sounds like a lot of, philosophical BS, but it's not. It's absolutely not. So when I tell people, for example, don't go to these bar association networking groups. It doesn't work. You're not going to meet the people that you want to meet. You tell me what it is that you like in the world. What do you like to do? Some people say, well, I'm a wine connoisseur. I like hanging out on Saturday night with my friends. We go bar hopping, or something else. My kids' little league or something. That's where you got to get involved in. Don't always try to sell yourself as a lawyer, because that doesn't work. Be yourself. My mother had multiple sclerosis. I didn't join the bar association. I joined the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. They saw that I was real. I was authentic. I wasn't there to gain business. I was there because my mom had that disease and she was afflicted by it. And I want to make sure that other people, don't go through the same thing that I went through. That was real. That was important. That created a lot of contacts for me. Not because that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But because it was just natural. And everybody has an affinity or something that they want to do in the world that's not related to the legal industry. And that, in the end, will get you clients.
I part of the reason why I wrote my book was selfish, to get in front of kids growing up in dysfunctional circumstances, potentially addiction environments, right? That's why. And so that's the room I want to get into. And I've aligned with some organizations just, because I'm not joining these organizations to get up on stage to get cases from kids who are dysfunctional families. No, it's like doing work that's like kind of like, you just have this like drive to do the stuff, and the work's going to come. Yeah. It's just going to like probably hit you with more than you could probably handle, because you're doing it the genuine way, the authentic way. The sad thing is, you mentioned earlier, a lot of lawyers don't subscribe to this. Right. And so, it's sort of easier for us to stand up because, hey, like, we're so far gone with the, revealing who we are. So, you're a very experienced attorney. You've been doing almost 40 years. You've written a couple books. You've built up a really good, plaintiff's practice. What's your greatest challenge right now in your career, Neal?
Well, my greatest challenge is the pivot. So I made the pivot about 4 years ago, where I started doing more of counsel work, and I wrote my book, and I wrote another book, and I started speaking, and I started taking on some private clients. What's next? I'm always thinking in my head, what's next? And part of me says, at some point you don't have to worry about what's next. You should just kind of I don't want to say take it easy, but just let things happen. Right now, I'm enjoying, the position that I'm in now. And, you get to a certain age and that life is catching up with you. And I don't want to get overly serious here, but at some point, we all, know that this is just temporary. And
Very.
so what is it that you want to do? So I'm kind of like in that moment right now. And, depending on the day that I wake up, I might feel one way or the other. And that's the truth. I'm being honest.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So before we start recording, you mentioned, we talked about, a chip on our shoulder, a little, anger that, we soften as we age. So I'm 48,
Yep.
a little bit behind you, but not far because it's going quick.
Yes.
There's a lot of lawyers in this call that have a lot of entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs grew up around turbulence, and so they're carrying some scars, probably not too dissimilar from the scars that we carry, right? How do you do anything specifically? For example, with my mental health, I meditate. I'm an open book about, meditation, journaling. We mentioned, again, anger and chip on our shoulder. And I feel like I'm always going to have that to some degree, but it's sort of abated. How, do you stay calm and present, maintain your self-care? Because people are relying on you for wisdom and guidance. So you got to keep your stuff right? How do you do that for yourself?
It's a really good question. I have a great wife. Gina is, I can't speak enough about who my partner is, and I know your story. It's just, it's a great story, and your wife is a big part of it.
Totally.
And so my wife, my kids, they're grown up now, and they're not with me anymore. But I have a great relationship with my kids and my stepkids. I like to work out. I work out 3 times a week.
Good.
Yeah, that makes me feel good. I live by the ocean. I don't know how much longer, but I live by the ocean, and that's nice, especially in the warmer weather. I've been doing things that I never did in my life. For the last 5 years, I've traveled all over Europe. I never went out of the country. No, I'm not like other people. I did not fly all over the place when I was a kid. My parents didn't take me anywhere. And so, the truth, I'm lucky when we went to a Chinese restaurant. That was it.
Big deal.
And that's right. And so, I travel. I like traveling.
It's awesome, man.
And you just have to remember that this is a temporary journey.
Yeah.
And I saw a great saying the other day. It was worrying is like paying down a debt that you don't owe. What's the point of work? What's the point of worrying? What is the point of worrying when it hasn't happened yet? Why are you wasting your time on that? So I try to think about those things. And here's the other thing. I have full of gratitude. And this is what I mean about that. I wake up in the morning, I open up my eyes, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm grateful. I put my foot down, I don't have any pain. I'm grateful. I'm able to go to the bathroom. I'm grateful.
Yeah.
Kids that maybe I don't always agree with, but they're healthy. It's right. And they don't always agree with me. I'm healthy. And so I'm grateful for that. I really have a lot of gratitude. When you come from the world that I came from, or from where you came from, you know what? Having a tuna sandwich with a glass of Coke or whatever it is, you're grateful.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Gratitude is something that you said word of the year was authenticity last year. I feel like it's gratitude this year.
Yeah.
I try to saturate in gratitude. I struggle sometimes because Neal, a lot of lawyers on this call were hard charging, driven, more reviews, more money, more cases, more bigger house. That shit doesn't do anything. And I know that. So I need to get back to the ground once in a while and say, hey, you got enough. Like
and here's the other thing, Chris. I tell this to my son. It's not just everybody else. I tell it to my son too, and my daughter. Stop looking to the right and to the left. Stop it. Look, ask yourself, where did you start and where are you now? I had this conversation with my son a few days ago on the telephone, talking about jobs and stuff. And I said, look how much you've done from where you began. Look where you are now. Don't worry about the guy that bought this house for this much money Stop it. And this is the other thing. To the young lawyer, it seems like every personal injury lawyer is making a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
It's simply not true. And I said this, I have to scream at the top of my lungs. That's not true.
It's not.
Not every personal injury lawyer is making $1 million or $500,000. Half of them that tell you that they do are lying.
Yeah.
Problem is you don't know which half is lying. But of course, you know, you want to make money. I get it. But don't assume that, you know, that you have to do what this guy did or what this gal did. Because if you're going to keep on doing that, playing that game, you're going to always be chasing. You're never going to know when to rest.
And you're always going to be unhappy and miserable.
Yeah.
You might get more miserable, more unhappy the richer you get. I think that's the key.
I remember when you in your book when you said, I'll forget, when you said you moved into that really cool apartment building.
Yeah, I was a big shot, Neal. Big shot.
You felt good. You felt good, right? You were happy. It's okay. It's okay to express your, you know, feeling great about having achieved something really good. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that's the goal every time, I got to get it bigger. I got to get it fancier. I got to get the new X321, whatever it is. Give me a break, man. There are people that I know that if they had to drive, let's say like a Honda or a Nissan, they would kill themselves. They would kill them.
Oh yeah. It's worse than death. Yeah. I mean, unbelievable. So I encourage the audience, pick up Neal's book. There's Who's in the Waiting Room. What's the second book called? The newest book?
It's also Who's in the Waiting Room, but it's for personal injury lawyers that refuse to blend in.
I love it. On Amazon, I assume?
Amazon, yes.
All right, everyone, pick up Neal's 2 books. My 1 book, Scaling the Wall. You're going to take something away. I guarantee you.
Absolutely.
And I say that.
Yeah, maybe at some point we'll bundle them all together.
Yes. Let me ask you this as we wrap up. What's your greatest success in life so far?
Probably the greatest success for me was having my mom see me graduate from law school because I put her through such hell.
That's a big
when
deal.
I dropped out of high school.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
One last question. It's just a random question. I cried a lot writing my book, man.
Yeah.
Alone.
Yeah.
Did you cry when you were writing your book? Your first book?
Oh yeah.
It's legit.
I played music when I would write, like soft, you know, classical music, and that made it even worse. But I needed that made it worse. My wife said, "Why are you playing that music?" And I said, "1 hour just gets the emotions going."
Whatever it takes.
Yes.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. You're a rock star. A lot of affection, a lot of admiration for you, a lot of inspiration I've taken from you. How can people get in touch with you?
How can they? Well, you connect with me on Instagram, Neal A. Goldstein, NealAGoldstein, law.com, NealAGoldsteinLaw.com. That's the best and easiest way. From there, you could just go on my bio and see what we could do together.
Yeah, reach out to Neal. I think you can tell from this hour-long talk, he's the real deal. Thank you so much, man.
Chris,
I appreciate you so much.
Let's cross paths very soon.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode of The Earley Show. Be sure to check out more episodes of our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel.